Imagine standing in your kitchen at midnight, about to sign the papers that will finally declare your husband dead after 10 years. You've mourned him, raised your child alone, and built a new life from the ashes of your grief. Then, you hear the back door slide open. You turn around, and there he is, dripping wet, scarred beyond recognition, staring at you with eyes you thought you'd never see again. Your dead husband is standing in your kitchen, and he's not alone. The danger he brought with him is already at your door. This is the story of Nia Cross, a woman who learned that some ghosts don't stay buried, and some secrets are worth more than a lifetime of silence. Before we dive deeper, please tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into these stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. On a humid September night in Atlanta's Buckhead neighborhood, Nia sat at her granite kitchen island, surrounded by the silence of a life she had painstakingly rebuilt. The house was immaculate, every surface gleaming under the recessed lighting, every corner free of clutter. It had taken her 10 years to create this fortress of stability, and tonight she was about to close the final chapter of her past. On the counter before her lay a document with bold letters across the top, Presumption of Death Certificate. Her pen hovered over the signature line. Outside, rain drummed against the windows with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. A half-empty glass of wine sat beside the papers. In the room upstairs, her 10-year-old son Leo slept peacefully, unaware that his mother was about to illegally erase his father from existence. Dante Cross had disappeared exactly 10 years, 2 months, and 17 days ago when his boat capsized somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of South Carolina. They never found his body. For a decade, Nia had lived in the agonizing space between hope and acceptance, between widow and wife, between moving forward and staying frozen in the past. Tomorrow, she was supposed to sign different papers, papers that would bind her to Marcus, a kind orthopedic surgeon who had courted her patiently for 2 years, a man who represented safety and predictability. Nia pressed the pen to paper, her hand trembling slightly. This was it. The final goodbye to the soft-spoken man who quoted poetry on their first date, who had surprised her with breakfast in bed, who had cried when Leo was born and whispered that he'd never been so terrified or so happy in his entire life. She was about to sign when the sound cut through the silence, a soft mechanical click that didn't belong. The security system hadn't chimed, no alarm, no warning, but the back door was sliding open. Nia's breath caught in her throat. She grabbed the chef's knife from the block beside the sink, her architect's mind already calculating escape routes, her mother's instinct screaming at her to get to Leo. The rain grew louder as the door opened wider, and then a figure stepped into her kitchen, water streaming from her tactical gear, his boots leaving muddy prints on her pristine tile floor. He was tall, broader than she remembered, with a face carved by violence and time. Scars ran down the left side of his jaw, and his eyes, those hazel eyes she had looked into 1,000 times, stared at her from underneath rain-soaked hair. When he spoke, his voice was gravel and rust, a stranger's voice carrying a ghost's words. "Don't scream, Nia, and put down the knife. I bought you that set for our first anniversary." The knife clattered to the floor. Nia's knees buckled, and she gripped the counter to keep from falling. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Dante Cross was dead. She had spent 10 years accepting that truth, 10 years building a life on that foundation. But the man standing in her kitchen knew things only Dante could know. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Hallucination? Imposter? Ghost? Cruel joke? But then he took a step forward, limping slightly on his left leg, and she saw the way he favored his right side, the exact same way Dante used to after his college basketball injury. "I know you have questions," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes scanning the windows as if expecting something. "But we don't have time. They're coming, Nia. They're coming for you and Leo, and we have maybe 20 minutes before they get here." Nia's shock turned to fury in the space of a heartbeat. She picked up the knife again, pointing it at him with a steadiness that surprised them both. "Get out of my house," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous.
I don't know who you are or what kind of sick game this is, but you have exactly 10 seconds to leave before I call the police." The man who looked like Dante didn't move. Instead, he reached slowly into his vest and pulled out a photograph, crumpled and water-stained, holding it up for her to see. It was their wedding photo, the one that had been in his wallet. "September 12th, 2014, he said softly. "Our honeymoon in Tybee Island. We stayed at that bed and breakfast with the yellow shutters. On our last night, you told me you were pregnant. We sat on the beach at sunrise, and I cried because I was terrified I'd be a terrible father. You held my hand and said fear meant I'd be a great one, because only people who care are afraid of failing." Nia's knife wavered. Those words, that moment, it was sacred. Something she had never shared with anyone, not even her therapist, not even Marcus. "How?" she whispered, the anger draining out of her, replaced with a grief so profound it felt like drowning. "How are you here? They said you were dead. The Coast Guard searched for 3 days. Your boat was in pieces." Dante stepped closer, his movements careful, controlled. "I didn't die, Nia. I was recruited. The boat capsizing, it was staged. I had a choice, work for them or they'd harm you and Leo. So I disappeared. I've spent 10 years doing things I can't tell you about, becoming someone I don't recognize, all to keep you safe. But something changed. They've decided you're a liability, a loose end that needs tying up. I couldn't let that happen." Nia's mind struggled to process his words. Recruited? Staged? It sounded like something from a movie, not real life, not her life. She was an architect. She designed buildings. She went to PTA meetings. This couldn't be happening. "Prove it," she demanded, her voice shaking. "Prove you're really Dante." He didn't hesitate. He turned slightly, lifting his wet shirt to reveal his lower back. There, barely visible beneath newer scars, was the small tattoo of a compass rose, the one he'd gotten on a drunken dare in college, the one that pointed in the wrong direction because the artist was as drunk as he was. Nia had traced it with her fingers 100 times. "Your real name is Nia Marie Thompson Cross," he said softly. "You hate your middle name because you were named after your grandmother, whom you never met. You take your coffee with 2 sugars and cream, but you tell people you drink it black because you think it sounds more professional. You talk in your sleep, mostly about work, sometimes about Leo." Tears streamed down Nia's face. It was him. Impossibly, inexplicably, it was Dante. The man she had buried in her heart, if not in the ground. The father of her child who had missed every birthday, every milestone, every moment for 10 years. "Why?" The word came out as a sob. "Why didn't you call? Why didn't you send a message? Do you have any idea what these 10 years have been like? I had to tell our baby that her father was gone. I had to explain why everyone else had a daddy and he didn't." Dante's face crumpled with anguish. They monitored everything. Any contact would have triggered consequences. "I had to let you believe I was gone to keep you alive. It was the only way." Before Nia could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. "Mom?" They both froze. Leo stood in the kitchen doorway, his Spider-Man pajamas rumpled from sleep, his hair sticking up the way Dante's used to. He was rubbing his eyes with one hand, his favorite stuffed dinosaur dangling from the other. When he looked up, his gaze landed on the stranger in tactical gear standing in their kitchen, and his eyes went wide. "Mom, who is this?"
The question hung in the air like a blade. Nia watched as Dante stared at his son for the first time in 10 years, watched as his face went through a dozen emotions in as many seconds. Pain, love, regret, wonder, grief. Leo was no longer the infant Dante had held. He was a person now, with Dante's hazel eyes and Nia's determined chin, with his own personality and fears and dreams that his father knew nothing about. Nia moved quickly, positioning herself between Leo and Dante. "Go back upstairs, baby," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Everything's fine." But Leo wasn't buying it. He was 10, old enough to sense when adults were lying. "You told me never to let strangers in the house," he said,
his voice small but steady. "You told me to call 911 if anyone ever broke in." Before anyone could answer, the lights went out. The hum of the refrigerator died. The digital clock on the microwave went black. Even the streetlights outside flickered and vanished, plunging the entire neighborhood into darkness. Dante moved with incredible speed, grabbing both Nia and Leo and pulling them away from the windows. "They're here," he said, his voice cold and professional. "Nia, we need to move, now." Nia's blood ran cold. She heard it too, the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel outside. Too many footsteps, too coordinated to be anything innocent. "Mom, I'm scared," Leo whispered, clutching his dinosaur tighter. Nia scooped him up, her knowledge of her own house kicking in. She knew every corner, every shadow, every route she'd unconsciously designed into this fortress. "Follow me," she whispered. She led them through the darkened house with sure steps, past the living room where Leo's school photos lined the mantel, photos Dante had never seen. They reached the door to her home office, and she pressed her palm against what looked like a regular section of wall. It clicked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. "After you left, after they declared you missing, I redesigned the house," she whispered, as they descended into the hidden basement she'd built. "I wasn't going to be the helpless widow waiting to be rescued. I learned to protect myself, protect Leo. This is a safe room with reinforced walls, supplies, and a separate ventilation system. It also has surveillance feeds to every camera in the house." She pulled up the feeds on a tablet mounted to the wall, and they all watched as figures in dark tactical gear moved through their home with military precision. Leo pressed against Nia's side, silent now, his eyes fixed on the strangers invading his home. Dante watched the screens with professional detachment. 6 operators, standard sweep pattern. This room will buy us time, but they'll find it eventually. Nia's mind raced. She'd built this room as a last resort, never imagining she'd actually need it. She had spent 10 years being afraid, 10 years building walls and learning defensive tactics and installing security systems. She had become someone who could protect her child. "Then we don't wait for them to find us," she said, her voice steady. "We get out." Dante looked at her with something like surprise. "How?" Nia pulled up a different screen, showing a schematic of the house. "When I renovated, I didn't just add a safe room, I added an exit tunnel. It leads to the garage 2 houses down, the one that's been for sale for 6 months. My car is parked there." Dante's surprise turned to something that might have been pride. "You planned an escape route?" "You were gone," Nia said simply. "I had to become someone who could run." They moved through the tunnel in silence, Leo's hand tight and Nia's, the sound of their breathing echoing off the concrete walls. The tunnel stretched for what felt like miles, but was probably only a few hundred feet. Nia had walked it once when it was finished, testing it, praying she'd never need it. Now, with her son's hand in hers and her supposedly dead husband at her back, it felt like the only real thing in a world that had turned into a nightmare. They emerged in the garage of the vacant house. Nia's car, a sleek black SUV, sat waiting. "Keys in the visor," she said, moving to the driver's seat. "I know how to drive," Dante said. Nia fixed him with a look that could have cut glass. "You've been gone for 10 years. You don't know these streets, you don't know how I drive, and you sure don't get to take the wheel in my car. Get in or stay here, your choice." Dante got in the passenger seat without another word. Leo climbed into the back, still clutching his dinosaur, his eyes huge in the darkness. As Nia started the engine, she caught sight of him in the rearview mirror and made a decision. "Leo, baby, that man in the front seat, his name is Dante. He knew me a long time ago. We're going somewhere safe, okay? I need you to trust me." Leo looked from his mother to the stranger and back again. "Why does he look like my dad?" The question hit like a physical blow. Nia's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the passenger seat, Dante made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Because he is your dad," Nia heard herself say. "Because 10 years ago he had to go away to protect us, and now he's back because we're in danger. I know it doesn't make sense. I know you have questions. But right now, we need to go." She pressed the garage door opener and pulled out into the night. Behind them, through the darkness, she could see flashlights cutting through the windows of their home. Nia drove through the quiet Buckhead streets with the skill of someone who had trained for this moment. The defensive driving course she'd taken 5 years ago, the tactical awareness seminar, the way she'd memorized every route out of the neighborhood. Beside her, Dante was silent, watching her drive with what looked like amazement. "When did you learn to drive like this?" he finally asked. "After you died," she said flatly, taking a turn at speed. "Turns out there's a lot you learn when you're on your own." In the back seat, Leo had gone very quiet, and when Nia glanced at him in the mirror, she saw tears streaming down his face. Her heart shattered all over again. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Is he really my dad?" Leo asked, his voice breaking. Dante turned in his seat, looking at his son properly for the first time. Yeah, buddy, he said softly. I really am. And I'm sorry too. I'm sorry for every birthday I missed, every soccer game, every moment. I thought leaving was the only way to keep you safe. You missed everything, Leo said, and the simple statement held more accusation than any adult could have managed. I know, Dante whispered. I know. Nia's phone buzzed. Marcus, calling to confirm their lunch tomorrow. She let it go to voicemail, another life slipping away into the rearview mirror. Where are we going? Dante asked. Nia smiled. Somewhere they won't look, somewhere I designed.
The construction site rose against the Atlanta skyline, all steel beams and concrete floors and potential waiting to be realized. It was Nia's latest project, a mixed-use development that would house retail, offices, and luxury condos when it was finished. Right now, it was a maze of unfinished spaces, and more importantly, it was somewhere only Nia had the keys and access codes to enter. She parked in the underground lot, in a corner she knew the security cameras didn't cover. They made their way up through the construction stairwell, Leo between them, still silent, still processing a revelation that would take years to fully understand. The 20th floor was nothing but exposed beams and concrete, open to the night air. The rain had stopped, and the city spread out before them in a carpet of lights, beautiful and indifferent to their crisis. Nia found the corner she wanted, where she'd stashed some emergency supplies months ago. Blankets, water, a first aid kit, protein bars. She wrapped a blanket around Leo's shoulders, and he let her, his eyes fixed on Dante with an expression that broke her heart. Confusion, hope, anger, all warring in a face too young to hold such complexity. You should sleep, she told him gently. We're safe here for now. I'm not tired, Leo said, but his eyes were already heavy. He curled up on the blanket Nia spread on the concrete, his dinosaur tucked under his chin, and within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Nia stood at the edge of the floor, looking out at the city she'd helped build, the skyline dotted with projects she'd worked on over the past decade. Dante came to stand beside her. You've done well, he said quietly. The house, this, raising Leo. You've done more than survive. Nia laughed, a bitter sound. Don't you dare stand there and patronize me after what you did. You don't get to be proud of me for building a life after you destroyed the one we had. You're right, Dante said simply. I don't, but I am anyway. They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Nia turned to face her. Why tonight? She asked. After 10 years, why come back tonight? Dante's face was shadowed. Because I found out they'd decided you were a liability. The deal was, I work for them, I do whatever they ask, and you and Leo get to live normal lives. But deals with people like them don't last forever. They decided it was easier to eliminate the risk. The casual way he said it sent ice through Nia's veins. Who are they? A group that doesn't exist on any official record, that operates in the spaces between governments and laws. I can't tell you more than that. I won't. Because you're still protecting them? Nia's voice rose with anger. After everything they've taken from you, from us, you're still following their rules? Because knowing more puts you in more danger, Dante shot back. Every piece of information I give you is another reason for them to come after you. I'm trying to keep you alive, Nia. By breaking into my house the night before I'm supposed to get married? The words were out before she could stop them. Dante flinched. You're getting married? I was, Nia said. To a good man, a doctor, someone Leo likes. Someone who would never disappear in the middle of the night or bring armed people to our door. I'm sorry, Dante said. I'm sorry I wasn't the husband you deserved. I'm sorry I wasn't the father Leo needed. But I'm not sorry I kept you alive. Nia wanted to scream at him, to rage and demand answers to 10 years of questions. But looking at him now, seeing the scars and the weariness, she realized something. You didn't just leave to protect us, did you? She said slowly. You left because you thought it was your burden to carry alone. You thought you were being noble. You didn't trust me enough to let me choose. Dante's silence was answer enough. That's what I can't forgive, Nia continued. Not the leaving, not even the silence. It's that you decided for both of us. You turned yourself into a martyr and me into a victim, and you didn't give me a choice. You're right, Dante said after a long moment. I was so focused on keeping you safe that I didn't consider whether you'd want to be kept that way. They stood there,
two people who had once known everything about each other, now strangers, connected only by a sleeping child and a decade of grief. "So what now?" she asked. "I have information, evidence they don't want exposed. I was going to use it to buy your freedom, to make a deal." "I don't want a deal," Nia said fiercely. "I want the truth, all of it. No more protection, no more decisions made for me. If we're going to survive this, we're going to survive it as partners, or we're not going to survive it at all."
They sat on the concrete floor, backs against a support beam, sharing a bottle of water while Leo slept nearby. "Tell me everything," Nia said. Dante took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep and painful. He pulled out his phone, swiping through files until he found what he was looking for. He handed it to Nia, and she found herself looking at grainy security footage from a street she recognized, her own street from 10 years ago, late at night. She watched as a car, her car from back then, swerved and hit something. The driver got out, looked around in panic, then got back in and drove away. Nia's blood turned to ice. "I don't remember this," she whispered. But even as she said it, fragmented memories were surfacing. A night she'd worked late, exhausted beyond measure, Leo teething and neither of them sleeping. She thought she hit a deer, had seen something in the road, had felt the impact, but when she'd stopped and looked, there was nothing there. She'd convinced herself she'd imagined it. "You hit a man," Dante said quietly. "He was intoxicated, stumbling across the street in the dark. You didn't see him until it was too late. He passed away 2 hours later in the hospital from internal injuries." Nia felt the world tilting. "No, there was nothing there. I checked. There was no one." He crawled to the sidewalk before collapsing. "By the time you circled back, he was out of sight. But the people I would come to work for, they had cameras everywhere. They knew what happened before the police did." Nia's hands were shaking. "I was responsible for someone's death?" "It was an accident," Dante said firmly. "You were exhausted. It was dark. He was in dark clothing. Any investigation would have called it a tragic accident. But these people, they saw an opportunity. They came to me 6 weeks later with a deal. They would make the evidence disappear, make sure you never faced charges, never went to prison, and left Leo without a mother. In exchange, I would work for them for 10 years, do whatever they asked, no questions, no contact with my family. If I refused or broke the terms, the evidence goes to the authorities and you face serious consequences." Nia couldn't breathe. All these years, she thought Dante left because he was gone, because the ocean had taken him. But he'd left because of her, because of a moment she didn't even fully remember. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why didn't you give me the choice?" "Because I couldn't let you face that," Dante said, and now she could hear the decade of anguish in his voice. "I couldn't let Leo grow up with that situation. They told me the consequences would be severe. I couldn't let that happen. So you chose this for yourself," Nia said, understanding flooding through her. "You chose to be locked away from us, from Leo, from everything you loved. You thought you were trading your life for mine." "It wasn't a trade," Dante said. "It was the only choice I could live with. But I was wrong to not tell you, wrong to not let you make that decision. I realize that now." Nia stood up, pacing the edge of the floor, her mind reeling. Even if it was an accident, even if she hadn't known, a person was gone because of her, and Dante had carried that weight alone for 10 years, had sacrificed everything to protect her from the consequences. "The man I hit," she said, her voice hollow. "Who was he?" Dante hesitated. "James Thornton. He was 43, worked in construction. He had 2 children. By all accounts, he was a good man who made a bad decision to walk home that night." Nia closed her eyes, and for the first time, she grieved for someone other than herself. James Thornton, a stranger whose tragic end had set off a chain reaction that destroyed multiple lives. "I want to do something for his family," she said, anonymously, "something to help them." Dante nodded. "We can arrange that. When this is over, if we survive. But first, we have to make sure Leo lives to adulthood. That has to be the priority." "What's the plan?" she asked. "I have files, evidence of things the organization has done, operations, surveillance programs, things that would create serious problems for them if exposed. We can leak it, bring enough attention on them that coming after us becomes more trouble than it's worth. Or they stop us and the files disappear with us. It wasn't much of a choice,
but it was the only one they had. Then we leak the files, she said. We fight back. Dante smiled. Together, Nia agreed. But Dante, when this is over, if we survive, we need to talk, really talk, about what comes next. I'm not making any promises. I don't deserve promises, Dante said, but I'll take a chance.
Leo woke as the sun was rising. He sat up, looking around at the construction site, and his eyes found Dante. "Did you really have to leave?" Leo asked, his voice small but steady. Dante moved closer to his son, slowly. "Yeah, buddy, I did. I wish I didn't. I wish I could have stayed and watched you grow up, but I had to leave to keep you and your mom safe. Are the bad guys still coming?" Nia and Dante exchanged a look. There was no point in lying. "Probably," Nia said, moving to sit beside her son. "But we have a plan. We're going to make it so they don't have a reason to come after us anymore." Leo was quiet for a moment, then said, "If you had to leave, why didn't you ever send me a birthday card? Something so I'd know you were thinking about me." The question hit Dante hard. "I thought about you every single day," Dante said, his voice rough. "Every birthday, every Christmas, every moment. I have a whole notebook filled with letters I wrote to you, but could never send. I know that's not enough, but you were never, not for 1 second, forgotten." Leo looked at his father for a long moment. "Can I read them, the letters?" Dante's face crumpled. "When we're safe, when this is over, yeah, you can read every single one." Leo nodded, then reached out and touched Dante's hand briefly. "Okay," he said simply. The news broke at 3 p.m. Dante had sent the files to trusted journalists, and now the story was everywhere. Congressional hearings were being called, investigations launched, and the organization that had controlled Dante's life was being exposed. "It's working," Nia said, watching the coverage. "They can't touch us now." But Dante's face was grim. "This is just the beginning. We've damaged them, but the people at the very top aren't in those files, and now they know for certain that I betrayed them." Nia's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She looked at Dante, who nodded, and she answered, putting it on speaker. "Mrs. Cross," a voice said, smooth and cold. "Congratulations on your upcoming nuptials, though I'm afraid the ceremony may need to be postponed." "Who is this?" Nia demanded. "Someone who's very disappointed in Dante, but perhaps we can still reach an accommodation." "We're not making deals with you," Dante said. The voice laughed. "The organization will survive, as it always does, but you, Dante, you've made this personal. You've cost us resources, reputation. That requires a response." "Then come after me," Dante said. "Leave Mia and Leo out of it." "But that wouldn't hurt you enough, would it? You have 24 hours to turn yourself into us. If you do, your family lives. If you don't, well, the consequences will be severe. The whole world will know that Dante Cross is responsible for what happens to his family." The line went dead. Leo had gone very pale. "I'm turning myself in," Dante said flatly. "No," Nia said immediately. "Absolutely not. We didn't come this far to let you sacrifice yourself again. It's the only way to keep you and Leo safe. It's you making decisions for us again," Nia shot back. "I won't let you." "What choice do we have?" Dante demanded. "And I can't let you do this to save us," Nia said. "Not again. Not after everything." They stood facing each other, 10 years of grief and anger and love crackling between them. "There has to be another way," she said. Dante looked at her, and she saw him wavering. "Maybe there is," he said slowly, "but it's risky, and it requires you to trust me one more time." "Tell me," Nia said. The plan was to use Dante as bait, lure the operatives to the construction site, and turn Nia's knowledge of the unfinished building into an advantage. It was a long shot, but it was the only option that didn't end with someone they loved in danger. Nia spent the next hours mapping out every inch of the building, showing Dante the weak points in the structure, the places where they could create obstacles, where someone familiar with the blueprint could move unseen while intruders had to search carefully.
Nia sent Leo away with her business partner, Susan, a woman she trusted completely. She'd explained only that there was a family emergency, and Susan had asked no questions. Watching her son leave had been the hardest thing Nia had ever done, but she couldn't protect him and fight at the same time. As night fell over Atlanta, Nia and Dante prepared. They'd found tools from the construction site and set strategic obstacles throughout the building. "They'll come at midnight," Dante said. "That's standard procedure. They've sent coordinates, and it's this building. They think I don't know they're planning to ignore any deal." "How many?" "Best guess, 6 to 8 operatives. They'll be armed, wearing protective gear, using professional equipment. We're outmatched." "But they don't know the building," Nia said. "They'll move cautiously. That slows them down." At 11:45, Nia's phone rang. the same smooth voice, giving Dante instructions to meet on the 20th floor, alone. They promised that if he complied, his family would be safe. Dante confirmed he'd be there. Then they waited. Nia positioned herself on the 18th floor. Dante was 3 floors above, visible bait in their plan. The operatives came at midnight, exactly, professional and precise. Nia watched them on the security cameras she'd accessed, counting 6 figures in tactical gear. They split up to search the building, and that's when Nia's knowledge became their advantage. She'd created obstacles, weakened certain supports, created passages only she knew about. When the first team reached an area she'd prepared, she triggered a mechanism that caused debris to fall, blocking their path and forcing them to retreat. She moved through the building like she owned it, because she did in every way that mattered. She used service corridors and maintenance spaces that weren't on any official plan. When she encountered an operative, she used the element of surprise and her knowledge of the space to evade and slow them down. Above her, she could hear activity on the 20th floor, could hear Dante engaging with whoever had reached him first. She wanted to run to him, to help, but the plan required them to divide the operative's attention. Time became fluid. She was operating on pure adrenaline, her mind calculating angles and routes the way it did when she was designing. Then she heard Dante's voice over the radio they'd set up, strained with pain. "Nia, I need help. Top floor." She ran, taking the stairs as fast as she could, her heart in her throat. She burst onto the 20th floor to find Dante cornered by 2 operatives. They turned as she entered, and she saw them assess and partially dismiss her as a serious threat. It was a mistake. Nia had a tool she'd grabbed from the construction site, and she used it to create a distraction, allowing Dante to break free and engage one of them directly. The fight was chaotic and desperate. At one point, an operative aimed at Nia, and Dante threw himself in the way, taking a hit meant for her. He went down, and Nia screamed, rushing forward with nothing but fury. She fought with everything she had until the operative was incapacitated. Then she was on her knees beside Dante, her hands pressing against the wound in his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. "No, no, no," she chanted. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to leave again." Dante coughed, grimacing in pain. "Sorry," he whispered. "Always was terrible at following plans." Nia pressed harder, trying to will the bleeding to stop. "Dante, please. Leo needs you. I need you." She heard sirens in the distance, heard police radios. Someone had reported the disturbance. Help was coming. "Stay with me," she commanded, and Dante's eyes focused on her. "Always," he whispered. The police and paramedics arrived within minutes. Nia explained that they'd been attacked, that they'd defended themselves, that her husband had been trying to protect their family. The evidence supported their story. The surveillance footage, the professional gear the operatives carried, everything. And the leaked files had already created enough attention that certain officials were very interested in anything related to the shadow organization that had been exposed.
Nia woke in a hospital bed. A detective came to take her statement, and she told him a version of the truth that made sense in a police report. She left out the parts that couldn't be proven, focusing instead on self-defense, on protecting her family. "The men who came after you," the detective said, "they're not in any database. It's like they don't exist." "Some people operate outside normal channels," Nia said carefully. "My husband worked in that world for a long time. These people came after us because he wanted out." The detective studied her, then nodded. "You were defending your family. That's what the evidence says, and that's what my report will reflect. You and your husband have been through enough. The files your husband leaked are bringing accountability to some very problematic operations. There are people who are grateful to you both." 3 days later, she was allowed to see Dante. He was awake, bandaged and pale but breathing, his eyes clear when they met hers. She sat beside his hospital bed, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "You saved my life," she said. "You took that hit meant for me." "Seemed like the right thing to do," Dante said weakly. "I'm really tired of almost losing you," Nia said. "We need a better approach." Dante laughed, then winced. "Agreed. How about we just avoid dangerous situations entirely?" "That seems smarter." They sat in comfortable silence, and Nia realized that this quiet moment after the crisis was what she'd been mourning for 10 years. Not the grand gestures, but the simple partnership of 2 people who knew each other's worst moments and stayed anyway. "The organization is in chaos," Dante said. "The leaks triggered investigations. The people at the top are scrambling. Our contact was found deceased this morning. The threat against us ended with him." "Is it really over?" Nia asked. "As over as these things get. We'll need to be careful for a while, keep aware. But yeah, I think we're free." Nia looked at him, this man who had been her husband, her ghost, her partner. "Where do we go from here?" Dante met her eyes.
I don't know. I don't have a right to ask for another chance. But if you're willing, I'd like to try. Not to go back to what we were, because that's impossible, but to build something new, to be partners in whatever comes next. Nia considered. She thought about Leo, who deserved to know his father. She thought about James Thornton and the debt she could never fully repay. She thought about the woman she'd become in 10 years, strong enough to fight, wise enough to know that some scars never fully heal, but that didn't mean you couldn't build a life around them. You have to tell Leo everything when he's old enough, she said. No more secrets. And you have to go to therapy, real therapy. You have to learn to process what you experienced instead of just carrying it. And I'll go too. Agreed, Dante said. And you sleep on the couch, for however long it takes for me to trust you again. You have to earn your way back into our family, Dante. I will, Dante said, his voice fierce. Every day for the rest of my life, I'll prove it. The door opened, and Leo burst in. Mom said I could visit, he said, then saw Dante and stopped. You're really alive, he said, wonder in his voice. I'm really alive, Dante confirmed, and I'm not going anywhere, ever again. Leo approached slowly, then climbed up carefully and settled against Dante's side, avoiding the bandages. Dad, he said, testing the word. Yeah, buddy, Dante whispered. I'm your dad. Nia walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline where buildings she'd designed reached toward the sky. She thought about foundations and how to build something that would stand. Behind her, she could hear Leo asking Dante questions, father and son beginning to know each other. She didn't know what their future looked like. She didn't know if she and Dante would rebuild their marriage or if they'd be partners in parenting, but nothing more. But she knew that Leo was getting his father back. She knew that the organization was crumbling. She knew that for the first time in 10 years, they had a choice in what came next. That night, back in her hospital room with Leo asleep beside her, Nia deleted Marcus's contact information. She'd call him tomorrow, explain what she could, apologize for the life she'd almost let him build with her under false pretenses. Then she thought about the death certificate on her kitchen counter. Unsigned, irrelevant. Dante Cross wasn't gone. He was 2 floors down, fighting his way back to them. And Nia Cross wasn't the widow she'd been pretending to be. She was something stronger, something forged in survival. Tomorrow, when the sun rose over Atlanta, she would start the hardest construction project of her life, rebuilding a family from the fragments of the past and the possibilities of the future, one careful choice at a time. The story didn't end with happily ever after. It ended with possibility, and sometimes possibility was enough.
Sometimes love isn't about perfect endings. It's about choosing to fight for each other even when everything is broken. Nia Cross thought she'd buried her past, but when her husband returned from the dead, she learned that some ghosts demand to be faced, not fled from. How would you feel if someone you'd mourned for 10 years suddenly appeared in your kitchen? Would you have the strength to fight for your family the way Nia did? Let us know in the comments how this story made you feel, and subscribe to this channel for more. Let's keep breathing life into these stories that were never meant to stay silent. Thank you for staying with us through Nia's journey. Until next time, remember that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to rebuild.